recording again, because that would be an issue. And my face is somewhat visible now. Why is that? I mean, it's not terrible, but...
The computer light, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. Oh, yeah, I had the dark video up, and now it's slightly more light. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I did press record. Where did OBS go? Is it recording? It is. Okay, cool. I will bring up the next video. If you... the storm seems to have subsided, so I think we'll be good. What am I doing? That's not what I want. That's what I want. That one. Whoa, stop. Okay. All right. Since this will be going on your channel, I will let you take it away, and then I'll... you can't control this, can you?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll just have to... I'll just take notes, and then whenever you feel the urge to stop.
Okay. And then feel free to put up your hand if you need me to stop, and I'll just be like, stop it.
All right.
All right, cool.
So we're going to... I guess I'll put this like I'm putting it on my own channel. So I'm here with Pierce Watkins. And then he is What Would Pierce Ask? Has a lot of great videos. Basically, he does a form of street epistemology where he kind of interacts with conversations that he's not necessarily there for, and he thinks about what questions he would ask. It's similar to what I do, though I'm more pointed, or, you know, I don't know if you would describe your channel a different way. You can also...
Yeah, you kind of hit it right on the spot. It's kind of like a hypothetical street epistemology conversation. That's about how I would describe it. So, yeah, about right.
Great. And I think that could be useful. So he is, if you've ever watched my videos, he's got a lighter touch than I do sometimes. I'm trying to get a lighter touch too. So I guess that's the other side of it, is I feel like I'm trying to get to the point where I'm just asking questions. I just really haven't hit that stride yet. I do tend to talk somewhat about rhetoric and stuff like that, as opposed to just paying attention to the arguments. But yeah, so today we wanted to analyze a debate between is it Hey It's Vadim? He is the creationist cat, I think is the pseudonym that he goes by, and they are voting, or they are arguing about the election fraud. And I think this is a really interesting video to analyze, because I think that the person who is in favor of the idea that there was election fraud actually gives a lot of information, and we'll see maybe what questions we can ask when somebody is giving much more information than another video we had watched with the My Pillow guy, Mike Lindell. We'll see maybe some similarities and differences. So I would encourage you to go over to Pierce Watkins' channel, What Would Pierce Ask, and watch that video and see what the potential differences are.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what these fellows have to ask. I haven't seen even really a second of it, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting. All right, get started. Maybe skip the intro.
Yeah, and then the commentator talking.
Gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate. Vadim,
yeah, the moderator.
Logical conclusion based. So, see who wins.
Yeah, I think
who wins.
Okay.
Absolutely. So this should be exciting because we never had this topic before, of course. And so we are going to get the ball rolling with John Maddox. And the speakers have roughly, it's always a flexible 10 minutes. So this may be as long as 12 minutes for his opening statement. And each speaker has that equal amount of time available to them if they'd like to use it. So John, the floor is all yours.
All right, well, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be discussing what I think is going to go down in history as perhaps the most incredible attempt at a bloodless coup in the history of humanity, along with the most obvious propaganda and information control operation of all time. Now, while my opponent will do nothing but spew standard leftist talking points, this blatant attempt to give Joe Biden the presidency through voter fraud and irregularity is not a conspiracy theory. 1984 has arrived, ladies and gentlemen, and if you still retain the mental capacity to think for yourself, it is the only logical conclusion based on the evidence. Now, before outlining timelines and evidence to support my position, we must first consider what this voter fraud was predicted well prior to the election, and all the way to the extent of legal attempts were made in a variety of states with the express purpose of minimizing voter fraud, which was expected to occur due to the demand for mail-in ballots. However, in mostly Democrat-controlled states, many of these attempts were blocked by liberal judges, and in states such as Pennsylvania, they actually aggressively pushed to allow ballots to arrive up to 3 days after the election. And as if this shouldn't raise suspicion, in September of this year, so 2020, ladies and gentlemen, the PA Supreme Court changed Act 77 of 2019 by allowing votes to arrive 3 days after the election day and to permit drop boxes, both of which had been specifically precluded in Act 77. Even NPR wrote in its article that the, quote, Pennsylvania Supreme Court handed down several vote-related decisions Thursday that are likely to help Democrats this fall. The court extended the deadline for accepting mail ballots, will allow voters to submit their ballots through drop boxes, and remove the Green Party's candidate for president from the ballot. Now, going a step further, these decisions were exacerbated when the court ruled just prior to the election that even signatures on mail-in ballots could not be verified as basis for disqualification of a vote. Wow. How does that make any sense whatsoever? Until this year, unless you got your ballot notarized, had witnesses and special circumstances, you weren't even allowed to vote by mail at all, except in a few very limited locations. Yet in 2020, suddenly all of this goes out the window and you don't even need to get your vote in on time, let alone even verify the signature in order for it to be counted. But wait, there's more. Let's head over to Wisconsin, a state that wasn't able to get as many insane court rulings in their favor. And instead of dealing with witness signatures and address state law requirements, the Wisconsin Election Commission literally told poll workers they were authorized to, quote, fix it rather than invalidate the ballots which did not have the correct information. This instruction was actually sent out by the WEC to the voting districts and, quote, please, this was the instruction, please note that the clerk should attempt to resolve any missing witness address information prior to election day if possible. And this can be done through reliable information, personal knowledge, voter registration, phone call with the voter or witness. The witness does not need to appear to add a missing address. Hang on. So the law specifically states that it must be considered invalid. The ballot instructions sent out to the voter specifically stated they had to do this or it would be invalid. But in terms of the people who are given the responsibility to provide fair elections, nah, just ignore that law. The person who is voting doesn't actually have to validate their vote. I mean, think about that for just a second. Now, also a quick jump over to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a Democrat-controlled city in a swing state where on election night, Trump was leading statewide, but then a rather amazing miracle began to happen. Magically, these wards all stopped counting their ballots or reporting the count. However, when they did resume reporting votes, the most striking feature of the data received is a fact that cries out for clarification. So in 7 wards, voter turnout appears to have exceeded 100%. In 2 of those wards, turnout exceeded 200%. In another 15 wards, voter turnout exceeded 95%. Joe Biden carried 21 of 22 wards of the 95 plus precinct wards, but then again, he carried all but 1 of the 67 additional wards in which the turnout was above 90% and won 80% of the vote city-wide. In 25 of them, Biden received 97% or more of the vote. Not only that, but Joe Biden was getting 30, 40, and in one ward, 56% greater number of votes than Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. I'm pretty sure that nobody thinks that Joe Biden is the kind of person who turns out the vote like Hillary Clinton, let alone Barack Obama. Similar stunning differences in voter turnout and percentage of votes occurred in other swing counties in swing states. Not nationally, not in counties that weren't pivotal, only in very specific ones. Let's head back to Montgomery County, just outside of Philadelphia. Barack Obama got 233,000 votes. Joe Biden got 313,000. But the total county population increase has only been 22,000 people. And he also doubled the margin. Now let's briefly look at Biden-only ballots. Right now, there's only about 450,000 of these ballots across the entire United States. This is amazing when you look at how it seems these only favor Biden. And almost all of them are cast in swing states, and most of them are in strong Democrat-controlled districts. Case in point, Georgia. There were 95,801 Biden-only ballots. So literally, the only thing marked was for...
I'm just going to stop him real quick here just because I have quite a bit of notes here that I took down just because he was going so fast here. So, he initially started off by saying based on the evidence. So I think that is a really good start, actually. I think anything that you believe should be based on evidence. And if you're basing it on anything else, I would question your method for determining if that's true. But he went on to say that there was voter fraud. That's more along his claim. It seems like he believes that the mail-in ballots were either all or seemingly a significant portion. And then he said something about signatures on the ballot could not disqualify whether the ballot was legitimate or not. So I think it goes back to like, if there's a signature on file and they compare what's written on the ballot to the two, and I think that might be really difficult for somebody who's validating these ballots to make sure they're real could do, because I think you have to probably be somewhat of an expert in handwriting to determine if the same person signature, if they match, if it's the same person who wrote it. So I guess I would ask, like, is our signatures a good way to determine if a mail-in ballot is legitimate or not? Or is there another better way to determine if a mail-in ballot is legitimate? And what way should we use? Should we just rely on the signature, if that's reliable? Or should we rely on something else, right? And then he went on to say that there's a lot of states that didn't allow mail-in ballots, but then for the 2020 election, there were more states that allowed mail-in ballots. And I would ask him, he seems to indicate that there were more mail-in ballots in 2020, or states allowing that, I should say, because of voter fraud, because Democrats wanted to get Biden into the White House, right? That seems to be his argument. Now, I would ask him, is there another explanation? What is if that's the best Pierce can't talk today. If that's the best explanation, what is the second best you know the word I'm trying to say. What's the second best
I
reason?
got it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that'd be what I would ask. And if he couldn't come up with one, I would ask him if it's plausible that because of the pandemic, that could be a reason. Not that is the reason, but is that a possibility, right? I've been talking for a while,
Right.
so I'm going to let you interrupt, Quayd, if you have anything.
No, that's fine because I have a few things. So I'll just try to make it quick. You covered some of it. And again, this is maybe where I'm a little bit more pointed. He did make a few claims here that I think would be hard to verify, but I think they warrant bringing up. That he said that this would go down in history as one of the biggest bloodless coups. And I would ask him, what does he think would have to happen that eventually it would be taught in history class, or it would just be general historical knowledge among people, that the election was stolen and that this was in fact a bloodless coup. And do voter fraud and irregularities necessarily, is that the best standard of evidence for that? If we have any voter fraud or any voter irregularities, does that necessarily mean that the Democrats um, knowingly and strategically tried to use um, tactics to steal the election? Or is there a possibility that we can have voter fraud and irregularities, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it could be just on the part of some individual bad actors, or some other reason? So that may be one question I would ask, um, in terms of the um, he had an issue with people being able to vote, turn in their votes not only through ballot, but 3 days later. I guess a question I would ask to him that is similar to the one that you asked, would be: is there a scenario that he can imagine in which he thinks it would be okay to have mail-in ballots? And what would that scenario be? And then also, is there a scenario in which he thinks it would be okay to have some voters turn in ballots 3 days late, and also that be okay? Um, and that kind of leads to another question I have. This is where I acknowledge this is in some way a gotcha question, but I'm 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 okay with that.
Let's hear it.
But it is: should all of the legitimate votes, as many as possible, be counted? If we have good reason to think that they're legitimate votes, would it be an injustice to deny the person who made that vote the right for their vote to be counted? And so that would then again turn to this idea of, okay, so then it would be okay if it was in mail in, as long as we had some solid way of verifying that it was an actual vote, or that it was 3 days late given certain circumstances. We won't say that the coronavirus was necessarily one of those, but just that there's actually no problem with that. And then also the idea of um, Wisconsin uh, poll workers being able to fix votes by verification, by calling people when they made a mistake on their address and just fixing that mistake. I am having trouble seeing connections there, so I would again ask, if you were in that scenario and you made an error on your ballot and you accidentally wrote down the wrong address, would you want workers to just throw your vote out? Or would you see that as an injustice, or would you want them to call and verify? And would you be okay with that? Um, I think we can keep going. I think there's
Okay.
you could ask questions all day with the information we have, but
I just have a few more things if you don't mind.
yeah, go ahead.
So, he said that Milwaukee was, or Trump was leading in like the Milwaukee district area or whatever, and then he claims that voting, or not voting, counting of the votes was stopped, and then when voting resumed, apparently, I think this is his claim, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you heard something different, but voting turnout ended up being like 95, or the votes that were counted after they had resumed counting, that almost all the votes were for Biden. And I guess I would question if voter fraud or something, a coup or something illegal is going on, is the best explanation for the resuming of voting and the difference of who is getting the most votes after the resumption of the counting. If that's the best explanation, or if what the next best explanation is, and why voter fraud or some other illicit, bad, illegal things are going on, or why that would be more likely than another explanation, right? So, and if
Yeah, I
he,
think.
go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, and if he couldn't come up with the second explanation, I guess I would ask him, were the votes that were counted by ballot, that people that walked into their, polling location, if those ballots were counted at exactly the same time as the mail-in ballots, or if the mail-in ballots were counted secondary, and if that's a possible explanation, right?
Right. Yeah. I think, and along those same lines too, would be uh, basically if so. The idea of maybe going back to the, should all the legitimate votes be counted, but also what does he think that the chances are that there were people that in those locations that were actually themselves Republicans or voted for Trump, and how does he imagine that they may, again, mine are a little bit more pointed, but like how can he describe to me a scenario in which they either completely hid it from the workers who, very likely could have voted for Trump, um, and that, or that they colluded even, or that how they got the Trump voters to collude even. So how does he imagine that these things happened under the noses of so many people who, yes, many of them were Democrats, but also, I guess maybe another way to put it is, what does he think the odds are that there were no Trump supporters or voters also working with those precincts or those poll locations, and that they colluded, or that it was kept from them, let's say.
Fair enough. Guess we will continue on that note.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Nothing for senators. And by the way, both Georgia senators are up for election. However, let's look at what happened in that context for Trump. There were a grand total in the entire state of 818 ballots in the entire state of Georgia that were only marked for Trump and didn't also cast ballots for other candidates on down ticket positions. 818 Trump only votes, 95,000 Biden only. And that's just in Georgia. That's 21% of all these type of ballots across the entire United States in Georgia. Just happened to be in Georgia. Now, what other signals for red flags in Georgia? Well, first off, let's talk about the 132,000 ballots that have been identified so far. They're supposedly from people who, it has been documented, have moved from the county. Yet somehow, ballots from them were cast. They just don't live where the ballot was sent anymore. Interesting, isn't it? That's a lot of votes, people. And remember, that's in Fulton County. 132,000 ballots in one county. Then how probable is it, continuing on in Georgia, that a water pipe bursts in the exact room that is holding a huge number of ballots in the State Farm Arena? Not just in the same room, right at the time they were supposed to be posting the vote count after the polls close. I mean, come on. One of the only Democrat-controlled areas in the entire state, in the most populated county, and they managed to have such a random plumbing problem in the exact room that needed to not have one. Come on. Are you?
I just want to interject real quick on this plumbing issue because I'm very, very intrigued by his argument here. I guess what I would ask is, if there was a plumbing problem in another district, let's say a county that Trump had won, and it had a plumbing problem at a very inopportune moment, right when they were putting uploading the counting, whatever they're doing, right? I don't know what they're doing. But right at an inopportune moment, would that be evidence that there was Trump collusion did Trump have people, China, whoever, inject Trump votes because there was a pipe burst and in a county that Trump won? And I mean, that might be kind of one of those questions where it's like not going to be helpful for him, but I feel like it's an important question because he seems to put a lot of emphasis on this pipe breaking. So, and he did say,
Yeah.
what are the chances? I wonder if there were any other plumbing problems anywhere else that also occurred. And I mean, maybe looking back at other elections, I wonder if there was ever had been a plumbing problem at a polling station. I imagine there must have been one at some point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say too, yeah, I think it's a good. Sometimes when people say, "What are the chances?" It's actually a good time to double down and say, "Well, what are the chances?" Like, I'm interested. What is the answer to that question? What are the chances that a pipe could burst? And then how is that? How do those chances change based off of the fact that it's a polling location or anywhere? What about it being a polling location means that the chances that a pipe bursts are different? And then can you give me like an exact percentage on that? And then also going back to, he had said that what are the chances that the uh, the worst place it could have possibly burst it did? I may ask him, are there other places that it could have been? How is he convinced that that is the worst place it could have happened? And then are there other places that could have been equally or near as bad that it just did not happen? Um, or also potentially, um, if this tactic was used, is it possible that why wasn't it, I guess, maybe used in other locations? Maybe another one. Um, yeah, and to go back just a little bit to some of the things he was saying, when he talks about 132,000 ballots uh, from people who had moved out of the county, and this may just be from my own ignorance, I don't know, but is it possible that they were, as far as I understand, you can vote. If you move to a location, you haven't switched your registration, you can still vote in the county that you previously lived in. Um, and so, is it possible that that's actually a reason for that? Is that there was just a lot of movement? Um, and then he says, and that's just in that one county. Does the fact that he has the data that it happened in that one county means that it happened, and it happened at the same level in other counties? And then finally, this argument he has about Obama and Hillary got X number of votes, Biden got way more, right? Is it possible that is there another possibility that people didn't like Trump so much that they went out for Biden vote, even though they didn't necessarily even? It, does the reason have to be that you know that Biden cheated because Biden is less enthusiastic than Obama or Trump can, or sorry, Obama and Hillary? Can it also be the case that maybe that's just how much some people disliked Trump? Not obviously all, but and that might not be the best way to word that question either. But it would be something along that. What is the connection between the fact that Biden got a certain percentage higher than Obama and Hillary, and this uh, definitive claim that you're making about voter fraud? Is it possible that he did just actually get those votes or something along those lines?
Yeah, yeah, I totally see what you're getting at. All right, we shall continue then, unless you have anything else.
Nope.
All
You
right.
really this gullible? This is just like the Democrat-controlled areas in North Carolina that had technical issues then that stopped reporting. Same thing in Wisconsin, same thing in Detroit, same thing in Pennsylvania. And just to remind everybody, before these areas all had simultaneous outlier random problems, Trump had very comfortable leads. We all go to sleep. We wake up the next day and we're all being told that somehow these votes had been found in every single one of these areas that suddenly put Biden in the lead in every state. Then you've got Nevada, which, interestingly enough, even though they didn't claim to have any technical issues, the Democrats decided to stop counting at 10:30 p.m., not 3 a.m., 10:30 p.m. They just said, "Hey, we're going to stop counting. We'll might start again tomorrow." What? We've been preparing for this election for how long, and they just decided to call it a night? I mean, think about this, people. In any other election, if a single swing state was all, if just one was having these types of emergency issues and all resulted in the same outcome, wouldn't you think something didn't feel quite right? I mean, this stuff is so mind-blowing. It's like I feel like they realize, wow, this is so like over the top that people won't actually think any of this could actually be true. Now we have to look at.
I just picked up on something he just said. He said, if something didn't quite feel right. And what I would ask him right there, I would try not to interrupt him, but I don't know if I could even contain myself at that point. But I would ask, are feelings a good way a good reliable way to determine truth? And I imagine he might actually say yes to that, in that moment anyway. And then I would ask him, if I feel that the Green candidate from the Green Party won this election, is that a good way for me to determine that that is true? And I imagine he would say no. So I just picked up on that, and
Yeah, that was a
it's
good
just
catch.
like a key word right there. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see what his response would be. I was thinking two questions I had when he talked about the random problems. Some questions I would have would be, how many problems occurred while Trump was winning? If he knew what that number was, or what was the rate of problems occurring at polling locations while Trump was winning, and then also what is the rate of problems occurring in other elections? And if he does not know that, then why is he sure that there is an overabundance of problems um, after Trump started losing? So that may be another question.
Yeah, totally.
The fact that the supposed blue wave never actually happened, and how does this correlate with votes for Biden versus Trump? So Democrats were supposed to take the Senate, they were supposed to expand their lead in the House, and they were supposed to absolutely crush Trump. So they didn't take the Senate, they lost seats in the House, and until all these voter irregularities popped up all over the swing states, Trump was on a clear path for victory. In fact, data shows he was getting more votes in many counties he flipped in 2016. So you're telling me that across the United States and all over swing states, except those in heavily Democrat-controlled cities, he's getting more votes than he did in 2016, but we're not supposed to at least do a basic audit before the media tells the entire planet that Biden is the president-elect. Now, of course, people have been doing audits based on the data, and when the Bedford Law, which is the standard auditing concept which is used for all sorts of audits, but is recognized as like the way that you identify voter irregularities, well, it turns out that this established principle is indicating that a more detailed investigation should be pursued in different areas. But in spite of this, we've got the media claiming this has been debunked, and the process and the principles that are used in any other context shouldn't apply in this context. Amazing. Now let's take a quick look at the Dominion voting system glitches that also magically happened in a wide variety of states, but somehow on massive levels only in swing states. For example, in Pennsylvania, 220,000 votes were switched and 941,000 votes were, quote, lost. Wow, that's amazing. Michigan, 20,000 switched votes and almost 22,000 lost votes, which, surprise, surprise, just happens to be the margin needed to give Biden the lead. Come on, people, how can the math be this nuts? If you think I'm making this up, the system was flagged as error-prone and insecure in 2019, and multiple secretaries of state refused to use it because of the 184 documented problems with it. But all that aside, if you look at the comparison between all the states that used it, most either had 0 switched or lost votes due to the system errors, or maybe a few switched but 0 lost, or 0 switched and a few votes lost. But in swing states and states with major swing counties, somehow they either had massive amounts of both, or a balance between the two of the exact amount that accounts for the margin. And just for fun, why did the media call Arizona for Biden? As of right now, he's only down 12,000 votes and there's 46,000 votes left to count. But Arizona was called for Biden before Texas, before Florida, before many other states. This makes absolutely no sense, and it's yet another example of very strange things to all happen at the same time to make it seem like Joe Biden was guaranteed to win.
He lost me a little bit before, but with this is really interesting. So he says that it's bizarre that some other states were called previous to Arizona, I think he said, or the media, or it was after. Either.
Yeah, it was after.
After, okay. But regardless, So I guess his claim is that the media made a decision, I guess, a call, decided to report that a certain candidate won a certain state at a specific time. And I guess that he's seemingly saying that that might be a reason that to speculate, to think, to believe that there was voter fraud. And I don't know, I'm not seeing the connection. I guess I would ask him if taking a look at media reports and analyzing how they determine when to report a candidate has won or lost, or what candidate has won what state, if that is a way to determine the outcome of an election, if that has any bearing on who actually won the election in a particular state, right? I'm just not seeing it. I would like some sort of explanation on that.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think I would maybe ask him um, along the same lines, like when he talks about the media. So who exactly is the media? Like who would he say the media is? Is it CNN? Is Fox included in that or excluded in that? And if it were the case that they all had different methods of calculation and they all converged on the conclusion that it was statistically impossible for Trump to win at a certain point, does he think it would be fair to call it at that point?
Yeah, right.
And then just a couple other things. One is, let's see. Oh, I think actually he had mentioned that there were people who were polling as for him. So my question would, I think he actually said that like the Senate lost seats, or the Democrats had lost seats on the Senate. My question would be, what does he think the chances are that people vote like a split ticket? They voted for, and then how does he know that that is in fact what people did or did not do? And then he mentions polls. I might start to question what he thought the reliability, what he thinks about the fact that there were issues with polling when it came to the Hillary election and Trump losing, or I'm sorry, and Hillary losing. And then if polls can be wrong there, is it also possible that they were wrong in the Trump election? And that he lost, or is another possibility that he just lost more in other areas, that he absolutely still won in those places that were polled and he won very highly, but he just lost more in other areas. And then my final question might be what he thinks about the fact that many political experts, and this is probably where this would probably be a softball for him, but what does he think about the fact that political experts seem to agree, statisticians who work in elections say that Bedford's Law is not a reliable method, and it's not a reliable way to understand what happened in the Trump Biden election.
Very good questions. Continue on.
Sure. I mean,
Sorry.
I hope he's close. I think maybe he's close.
For all the magic shutdowns on reporting the night of the election, mathematically, Trump was ahead in both electoral college votes and ahead in the swing states, even though on all the media outlets, they actually did the flip-flop of that. I got it about a minute ago. Even Las Vegas odds had switched to give Trump 60% chance of winning. Then it all stops, we go to sleep, we wake up, and everything required for 180-degree pivot has happened. Now, I have purposely not used anecdotal evidence, although at this point there are hundreds of sworn affidavits by people who were working at the polls claiming to have witnessed ballot modifications. There's video of people in Philadelphia literally filling out dozens of ballots by hand, all while police officers standing next to them inside of polling stations. It's gone to the extreme of the state Supreme Court, I got one paragraph left, state Supreme Court of PA ordering different counties to comply with state law, and sheriffs refusing to comply and threatening to arrest people who attempt to fulfill and follow actions.
We'll switch it over. Thanks so much. We are going to kick it over to Hey, it's Vadim. And as mentioned, our guests are linked in the description, folks. So if you'd like to hear more from them, you certainly can. And with that, the floor is all yours, Vadim.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's it's Vadim, and yeah,
Oh, did you have any thoughts on John Maddox' final statements?
Yeah.
There?
Yeah. So I mean, the final ones I think are hopefully the ones that we could find common ground on. You know, how reliable are Vegas odds? How often do Vegas odds turn out to be correct? How many bets are made on a daily basis? What is the percentage of reliability of Vegas odds? And then I'm not sure how to turn this in question form, so maybe you know it, but he is talking about these anecdotes of even police officers seeing it. So I don't know, like what are the chances that police officers? Does he think that they're all Democrats, or
Oh,
what is
okay.
he?
Yeah,
What is he suspecting is going on there?
I didn't even think of that. I was, yeah. What do the police officers have to do with the election, with the people changing the ballot supposedly? Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems to be saying that they're seeing nefarious things going on and overlooking it, which is to me is very deeper scale. Um, it represents kind of a deeper level of conspiratorial thought. I think because I've already watched this, I think that is one thing that Hey, it's Vadim points out. So I may have just already given part of his thing, but I think that one of the things he points out is potentially that most police officers, statistically speaking, are actually Republicans. So, you know, what are the odds that the vast majority of them, or the ones he's saying saw these issues, that, you know, very little of them to none of them, as far as I know, none of them reported uh, any large scale fraud issues.
I think the best way to phrase that as a question, I think, would be to ask. Well, first of all, I would want to know how many police officers were there, whether it was like 3 or a dozen, right? I would get kind of that idea. And then I think I would go down the route and ask, like, of these police officers, how many do you think would be be willing to overlook some nefarious things going on with regards to the election? Do you think most police officers would be willing to completely look the other way? Do you think that most police officers wouldn't document minimally what's going on? At least make a report, not necessarily, start pepper spraying everyone or anything like that. But do you think most police officers would uphold the law and at least document it for later persecution? Or what do you think most police officers would respond with, right? I think that would be my question. I don't know if that's a good question or not, but I think that's how I would have to word it.
Yeah, I think it'd be something along those lines.
Okay. Are we gonna?
And then that's what I was wondering. Like we can, I think that the fair thing would be to analyze Vadim, but we've already gone on for quite a bit now, so maybe we could do part of it. I don't know. I just wanted to see. I guess. What do you think?
Let's. Why don't we continue on for a little bit and see what he has to start with, and yeah, go from there, I guess.
All right, sounds good.
Cool.
President-elect Joe Biden has indeed won the election. Mr. We hold these truths to be self-evident, and all men were created equal by the go no, oh no you thing. He has defeated the great whining, glowing, spray tan orange Oompa Loompa from hell.
Wow. I don't know that that's a convincing argument.
Right.
Wow. I'm going to ask a question anyways, just because, why not? Because that's what I do. If a president was orange in color and did look like an Oompa Loompa, like he's describing, Not to say that any candidate does look that way, but if a candidate did look like that, would that be a good way to figure out who won in an election? And I think I think the obvious answer there is no. And I am being kind of naughty and sarcastic here, but it's so.
Yeah, I just gotta say, it's hilarious hearing you try to ask like a straightforward monotone question with, like trying to remove your own biases and emotions, but it's got the words Oompa Loompa and
Yeah.
Orange Man in them. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree with that. And also, I do want to say, not to defend him too much because I don't like his style. I think that Hey, It's Vadim has a very particular style. This is in line with that style. He tries to do comedic acts. I don't think it bodes well for debates and communication. So,
Yeah, there might be a place for humor, but in a debate, I don't think there's really a place for it.
right.
Agreed.
And yet we have all these claims of election fraud coming from a president who made the ludicrous and thoroughly debunked claim that 3 million illegals were bussed in to vote in 2016, and made a head-spinning amount of totally unsubstantiated, unsupported, and in fact thoroughly debunked claims that the mail-in vote-in system was easily susceptible to fraud. And we have a deluge of highly dubious claims that just keep coming in of voter fraud from the general public. I mean, who could have seen this coming with all that Trump was saying in the lead up to the election? I don't know. It just boggles the mind. But guys, these claims.
Sorry, I keep on interrupting this guy, but there's so much to be said about that. Regarding like the illegal busing in of immigrants in 2016, I think he said. So Trump made that claim, and apparently it is false. I don't know anything about that actually, but I'll assume that Hey, It's Vadim is correct about everything that he said. I'm just going to assume that. But assuming that all of that is correct, is a claim that Trump makes, or any candidate makes, is that a way to determine the outcome of an election? I mean, it might influence an election and how people vote, perhaps, maybe, but does that tell us anything about how these people actually did vote and what the outcome in any particular state or the election as a whole is? Is it a good way to determine it? And I think obviously no, but yeah, I really don't like that argument at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think that basically what he's arguing so far, it can be wrapped up in is Trump has been wrong about these other things, therefore there couldn't have been election fraud, or that Democrats couldn't have stolen the election. And I don't think that that's a very good connection. I think at the most you get that maybe when Trump says something new, he might be lying, or he might be incorrect, but that's still not going to tell us whether or not votes were switched or who voted what way or any of these other things. It's not really evidence for the position that voter fraud didn't happen in a way that disadvantaged Trump heavily.
Right. I guess Trump being dishonest in the past might mean he's being dishonest in the present and in the future, but that doesn't necessarily say anything about any particular election. I guess that's kind of what you're saying.
Right.
And I'm in complete agreement with it.
Yeah.
Are in fact overwhelmingly either based on hearsay, speculation, claims that lack foundation, and conspiracy theory. They all lack genuinely credible evidence or have been explained at this point abundantly, which is why these claims are not being pursued by law enforcement agencies who are mostly right-leaning, by the way. These things are taken very seriously when there's anything remotely credible. And yet they're not being pursued. And all of the cases that Trump has tried to bring up in frivolous lawsuits have basically been laughed out of the court. I'll get to a few of the claims that have been made in a moment. But first, I want to say that I do have a document.
I just want to say he kind of turned that around a little bit, and I kind of like what he's saying a little bit better now rather than how he started off, because he started off terrible. But I like what he's saying now. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, oh sorry.
No, you
Yeah,
can.
in terms of I do think that he's making a lot of assertions that, I can take on face value, that these things were debunked and they've been dismissed, and he's kind of reiterating these things, but I don't know that they've been debunked or dismissed. I'm fine with kind of inductively coming to that conclusion based off of my own information, but it may actually be a better tactic to share. They said this thing was true, and here's how we know it's not true. But he seems to be trying to get in a lot at once.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't.
I do.
Did he say the word debunked? I'm not.
He may not. He may not have
Yeah.
used that word.
Because I think
I
he's
got the
more
feeling it's
of
something along.
more of taking like a agnostic approach, where it's like you're making a claim and I just don't believe you until you present such evidence, right? So I think he's kind of
Okay.
taking that approach, which maybe that's the right approach to take. I think that the default position probably should be that the election was legitimate, right? And there should be evidence to change my mind that it wasn't. I don't think we should assume that the election was illegitimate and only be proven legitimate if there's evidence to support that it was legitimate. But at the
Right.
same time, I guess it's nice to have evidence that it was legitimate, right? So I guess that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think he can be doing both. I think he used a little bit of both language, so
Did he?
maybe at some points he is being agnostic. Yeah, but I do have one question just before we go on, just a little bit. Is he had said that he lost lawsuits, and I think that can be a strong indication of something. But another question I might have is that sector of the legal system the best way to verify whether or not voter fraud happened? So.
Right. Yeah, I guess has have courts, those particular courts that the lawsuits were dismissed or lost, or whatever you might call it. I don't know legal jargon that well, but have those courts in the past ever even had a case of voter fraud, right? Has that been a thing that has happened in the past? So do those courts even really have the right tools, I guess you could say, for lack of better words, to handle a case like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Continuing on then.
Yeah, let's get a little bit more, maybe.
Containing links to literally 80 studies conducted within the last 20 years that show that voter fraud is both excessively difficult and the actual number of cases is pretty fucking microscopic. For instance, a study published by, and by the way, I'd be happy to share that with Maddox if he wants me to send it to him. I realize it'd be kind of hard for him to look over 80 documents, but I'm willing to share it with him. A study published by New York Law found that most reported incidents of voter fraud are actually traceable to other sources, such as clerical errors or bad data matching practices, and reviewed elections have found incident rates between 0.0003% and 0.025%. So just like I said, absolutely freaking microscopic. 2 studies done at Arizona State University in 2012 and 2016 found 10 cases of voter impersonation fraud nationwide from 2000 to 2012, and later found 0 successful prosecutions for impersonation fraud in 5 states from 2012 to 2016, where politicians have argued that fraud is a rather pernicious problem. Also, the Heritage Foundation, which, if you don't know, is a deeply right-wing think tank. They say that 0.00000, that's 6 zeros, people, 7%, 7% earlier. They found that much of a percent of voter fraud cases over a 36-year period from 1982 to 2018. They could only find 1,285 cases of proven voter fraud out of more than 1.8 billion ballots cast, which amounts to the rate of all those zeros in the 7% I told you. I could go on. I have, like I said,
This might be a good point to stop. He was referring to previous year's elections and the amount of voter fraud. Okay, that's what I thought he was talking about. What I would ask is, just because there was very little to no voter fraud in previous elections, is that a good way to determine that there was little to no voter fraud in the 2020 election? Is there something that could have changed, I suppose? Yeah, that's about all I got on that.
That's the way that I would ask that question. Is it possible that something has changed in between the time that that data was created um, and the 2020 election, or what does he know that has or hasn't changed in terms of the law or the way that votes are recorded that could have created a situation in which voter fraud was less or more likely. I do think that he makes a compelling argument when he talks about the 80 studies talking about voter fraud being difficult. So the idea is that if it's been difficult in the past, we would really need some type of evidence to that would convince us that that has changed and it's actually easier now, is what I would say.
Yeah.
But in terms of the idea of in the past it being microscopic or not an issue in the past, I went to where you did in terms of like I'm not so much seeing the connection between the fact that it hasn't been that much of an issue in the past, meaning that it's not an issue now.
Yeah, we were
So-
kind of on the same page there. Awesome.
Yep.
Should we get a little bit more and then call it a wrap?
Sure.
All right.
said 80 of them to share, and I will make that available to both Maddox and Modern Day Debates if they'd like to post it. But these studies come from all sorts of highly respected places: Dartmouth, government accountability offices, the Republican Lawyers Association, Columbia University, Harvard. So, this runs the gamut of both right and left sources. Now, let's just hit a few of these dubious debunked claims that just have been, coming out. Like, usually when you have an event like this, you have lots of people making unsubstantiated claims. I'm just going to name a few. A viral video purporting to show Delaware County election staff fraudulently filling in blank ballots was later shown to be insanely misleading because they had zoomed in to crop out the bipartisan observers who were not more than 6 feet away. So, yeah, totally debunked.
I just want to interject on that one. So he brings up a very specific circumstance about a claim, and he's debating John Maddox here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe John made such a claim. This seems to be a separate claim that somebody else, made. And I guess what I would question on Hey, it's Vadim, how does this claim affect the claim that John made? I guess that's a really poor way to word that question. Let me reword that. Like, how does someone claiming one very specific event that happened, a very how do I ask this question? Quaid? Do you have
Yeah,
an idea?
I don't know how you were going to ask it, but you helped me think of how to phrase it, and that was, what is the weight or significance of this one event on the totality of the arguments, or the argument that John Maddox is making? So is it possible that in this one event there was fake fraud, but all the other ones could still be legitimate? Or how does this being not actually fraudulent mean that the other ones aren't fraudulent as well?
Ah, yep, that's exactly what I was trying to ask, but couldn't get the words out.
Hmm.
Yeah, perfect.
Um, yeah. How much more does he have to go?
I have no idea. Doesn't really let me skip around and see what we've got. I can drag it, but it will lose the spot.
Do you want to finish it out, or do you just want to stop here? Because I have a few more questions, or we could.
I wonder how long. He probably only has like 3 or 4 minutes left, right? Because I think so. Might as well continue it out.
Let's do it.
All right.
Viral ballot burning video shared by Eric Trump, of course, was a total fake. The city of Virginia Beach said that the papers were clearly sample ballots, and they showed the video. And in the video, or rather the article, they show what the official ballots look like, and you can see clearly in the viral video that there is no barcode on these things that are supposedly ballots. So then also just very recently, a postal worker, Republicans pushed claiming that he had evidence of voter tampering. He recanted his claims, and he since said that he made it up, that it was all bullshit. And of course, that was after Project Veritas, who have also made debunked claims, called him a hero and raised $136,000 for him through a GoFundMe. You know, I could go on, but this stuff gets to be like whack-a-mole, you know? It's like any event in which conspiracy theory-like claims emerge, you have an unending cavalcade of them. You hit one, another just pops up, but believe me, way more than what I've mentioned have been thoroughly debunked. And I want to reiterate the literature showcasing how rare and extremely difficult voter fraud is extraordinarily robust. There's also legal precedent from the Fifth Circuit courts, which, if you don't know, are basically second to SCOTUS in their respect or authority of legal analysis. And their findings correspond to what we see in the literature. I'll get into those findings more later if we'd like, but teal deer, they don't find it an issue. And these precedents would probably make it pretty difficult for Trump to mount a successful case. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what the word on the street is. We have quotes from die-hard Republicans like former George Bush Chief of Staff Karl Rove saying in response to all this that stealing hundreds of thousands of votes would require a conspiracy on the scale of a James Bond movie. That isn't going to happen. Can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, I agree with Karl Rove. Chris Wallace of Fox News likened folks like Ted Cruz to Japanese soldiers who came out of the caves 30 years after the war, believing the war is still going on. In other words, they're desperately out of touch and clinging to a fantasy. Republican Representative Will Hurd of Texas said a sitting president undermining our political process and questioning the legality of the voices of countless Americans without evidence is not only dangerous and wrong, it undermines the very foundation this nation was built upon. And he's right. It is. Those pushing these factually bankrupt claims, well, you know, it's funny because they usually claim to be on the side of truth, justice, liberty, American exceptionalism, yada, 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 America, fuck yeah. But, you know, they are helping, I think, in hopeless vein, to essentially stage an authoritarian soft coup. Mr. Maddox claimed that the opposite was true, but don't be fooled. That's what's happening currently on the right, who are spewing this nonsense. And finally, sure, you know, I'm going to go into a bit of speculation mode here, but I really think that it stands to reason that it's kind of crazy balls to think that with all the literature we have on the nature of voter fraud, that somehow, I don't know who, the deep state, or as Newt Gingrich put it, people like George Soros. Did you guys hear that, everybody? That's a dog whistle from Newt Gingrich there for you. Somehow in this election. They pulled off this grand conspiracy. They did it in a very narrow margin, which would only give time for more of these conspiracies to take root. Uh, they didn't bother doing it in 2016, but yet they had the ability to do so, apparently, back then, because they can do it now. And they didn't fucking flip just 2 or 3 more Senate races to give Democrats control of the Senate, because that's important, because the lack of having the majority will make Biden's job far harder. And also, in many of these states that Biden won, there were supposedly that were supposedly tampered with, down ballot Republicans, they did very well. Presumably, if these states were subject to widespread election fraud, we wouldn't see any of these things. I mean, that's just not the way that you would do it. You would do it in a way that provokes less, speculation of fraud, and you'd ensure that he has control of the Senate as well, or rather that Democrats have it. And there were a few races rather, that were incredibly close. So they easily could have done that if all of this tampering occurred, and yet they didn't. I mean, it reminds me of 9/11 conspiracies, because, like, at once we're supposed to believe that this extraordinary...
It's kind of funny. He kind of answered one of the questions that I like to ask sometimes, and that's, what would it look like if your claim wasn't true, right? And he said it would look like, they could do this and this and this and this. So I just thought that was kind of cool how he answered that question before I could even ask it. So
Yeah.
really difficult thing to pull off occurred, and yet they at the same time, they had a masterful execution of this, fraud supposedly, and yet at the same time they made all these not juvenile, just like amateur dumbass mistakes. So it just stretches credulity to the point of it just snapping in half. It just does not really make sense if you think about it. And I'm surprised that people expect us to believe this colossal hunk of horseshit. It's time for people to face the facts, collectively get their head out of Daddy Trump's ass, and cope.
Thanks so much. We will kick it into the first and only rebuttal sections for this debate. So we will have that open conversation. However, we're going to have a strict...
Sorry.
You're all right.
Yeah. I was trying to fix my camera for a second. I think I actually went off the screen for a sec, so I do apologize for that. But
no problem. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about this, I probably should have asked if cursing was okay. I wasn't sure, but
this is going on your channel at this point, so yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Whatever.
So yeah, I guess my final thoughts on this are, one is, I actually do, when they've had these types of debates in the past, they basically have a situation in which there is an opposing an affirmative. There's actually like 2 different claims being made by 2 different people, but this was actually an opportunity, or this was actually a situation in which there was an affirming opposing, and Hayat's Vadim actually isn't taking the opposing stance, as he's not utilizing the position of the opposing stance as well as he could by just asking questions, because you can be the agnostic here. You can just be the one not making the claim but just denying that another claim is true, and he doesn't do that to the full extent that he could. I guess this is mostly about asking questions, but I guess I do find his idea of bipartisan, the bipartisan denial of a conspiracy or of voter fraud, somewhat compelling. The fact that people of different political backgrounds all seem to come to the same conclusion, that it would really take, at that point, it would take some type of mass conspiracy. But then again, a Trump supporter may say that people just really don't like Trump, even conservatives. So that's also possible. Courts not finding it an issue, I find a compelling argument. So it doesn't sound like it actually went potentially into some legal courts. I'm not sure if he's talking about previous ones or not. I might have a question if he did. Um, the narrow margin, like you were saying, what would it look like if this were to occur? The idea that there was such a narrow margin, I think, is compelling. We were talking about anecdotes at one point, and I think that speaks a little bit to the anecdotal information that John Maddox was giving, and he did give a few anecdotal points, but we've already made the point. Is the fact that the anecdote or that voter fraud was faked in these instances, does that mean that it was faked in all the other instances? Potentially not. I think in terms of questions, that's it. So I don't want to just keep drumming on too long. I did want to make one final comment though about the sample ballot one, the one of the ones being caught on fire, because I was actually teaching a class and I allowed the student to make the claim that it was fraudulent, and he used that as his data. And what we do in class is we crowdsource, so we all are allowed kind of free reign on the internet to look for sources, and it was we collectively concluded that in fact that those ballots were sample ballots that were being burned. Doesn't really have anything to do with what we do in this video, but just an interesting story,
Yeah,
I guess, to end it with. But final thoughts for you?
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I think he made some amazing points, like that courts don't have an issue with the election results and how everything was tabulated, and the conclusion that Biden had won, right? So, and but I don't particularly like. I mean, I made this clear at the beginning that I didn't like the way he started off. Right, it was very sarcastic. It just didn't jive for me. But I think he kind of did redeem it in that little second portion, where he was somewhat agnostic, and more or less, I think he basically said, "You're making a claim, and I don't believe you," to some degree. And then after he, kinda in a way, I guess you could call it a straw man, just because John wasn't necessarily making these claims, and I don't think those claims had any connection on whether other claims are true. So I didn't particularly like that. But I mean, ultimately, I guess I do agree with his position. So I feel like he could have done better in, kind of like what you said, where he can just kind of sit back and ask questions rather than make active claims or straw man John. So that's kind of my final thoughts on the deal.
Yeah, I think it's called a burden of proof for a reason. It's a burden. So why would you take it when you can get people to realize something without adopting that burden, and it may end up just confusing them too. So
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, I agree.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for this.
Yeah, thanks, Quayd. Thanks for having me on your channel. I do apologize for accidentally jumping off the screen for a few seconds there. But
No, that's no big deal.
all right, cool. Well, I guess that's pretty much a wrap. I don't know how you like to end videos, but I'll let you have the final words.
I don't. I just
Okay,
kind of
you just
like,
cut it?
okay, well, that's it. Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Bye. Yeah.
All right, fine.
All right. See you around, Pierce.
All right, see ya. Thanks for doing this.
Yep.